Hi guys, I don't usually do this, but I'm actually going to do a video right now that is designed for two different classes. And I typically don't do cross-content kinds of things like this, but for this particular term, I felt like it was important. Now, for any of you who are taking either LDRS 802, VA and VC with me, and or LDRS 811. There's a little bit of crossover. So for people in 811, I'm hoping that this is just going to reinforce some of the things that we've already covered a little bit this semester. For those of you who are only in 802 and you're not also in 811 at the same time, you will get some of the content of what I'm going to talk about here in your 811 class, but it will be a little bit through a different perspective or a different lens. One of the things that my experience and my education can bring to leadership studies is an additional perspective and research base and expertise in the education world. And there are a few things from my education background that I think are really important to help inform what you're doing in leadership studies. And we don't get enough time a lot of times to add layers onto this sort of a thing. So because of where you're at in your modules for both 802 and 811 right now, I think it's important to reinforce just a few things. Number one is that almost everybody who comes to the study of leadership studies, almost everybody who comes to us who has decided that they want to get a master's degree in organizational leadership already bring with them a general philosophical base, personality base, perhaps certain type of job that lends themselves to really feeling akin with the idea of either transformational leadership or individual personal development. You tend to be more theory Y than theory X and work in organizations that are the same, or they might not be. They might be theory X organizations, but you're hoping to impact them or change them, or you're in a position where you identify a little bit more with a theory Y perspective. And a lot of times, whether you're concerned with your own individual leadership development or whether you're concerned with a more collective leadership development or transformational experience or mentorship, I mean, this can manifest itself in a lot of different ways. But the whole idea of seeing a person as a whole person and wanting that person to be the best that they can be, whether that's yourself or whether that's an employee or a follower for whom you are the designated leader, or whether it's an organization bettering itself to be a better organization, or whether it's volunteers that you work with, or whether you're in public service and your relationship with the community, you want the community to be better. Most of the time, we are all like-minded around the idea of trying to improve things, ourselves, our people, our organizations, our communities. And so with that idea of transformational development, there come some really important things from the education world that can help you as you go through this. And most of the time, those things are missing from the leadership literature. So I know that I've asked you to do just a ton this semester, but with the combination of classes that I'm teaching this semester, it has kind of dawned on me that I don't think that I've done enough in terms of covering some of that cross content. And I'm doing the same thing in some of my education classes where I'm bringing some more of the leadership stuff over to education as well. I think it's a really interesting balance when it comes to some of these developmental ideas that I'm talking about. So we see it with transformational leadership, organizational learning, organizational development, leadership development programs. In education, the same kind of development that I'm talking about, it comes along the idea of epistemology, which is really the study of knowledge, the study of how we learn. Our own framework of understanding individually how we learn. So not just not what just is the best way to learn something, but what is the best way for us to learn it. So personal epistemology, moral development, and cognitive development. So we don't get those terms a lot in the leadership literature, but we do talk about it that way in the educational literature. So sometimes the theory and the research and the practice, remember, I'm always trying to reinforce that that's what we do in graduate education is theory, research, practice, theory, research, practice, and trying to get you to apply it in an experiential way in organizations. Experiential learning is another big one for education, by the way. But I think there are some really great things that we can learn. Now, if you're already in 811, we covered some of this earlier in the semester, and there was one particular scholarly journal article that you read about Keegan's orders of consciousness. And it was a good article. But I'm not quite sure that with everything else that you had, to do at that time in the class and this semester, whether or not some of that stuck the way that I would kind of hope that it would. And for those of you who are in 802, you're doing a lot of things that are particular to your organization with your applied final project. That has to do with trying to bring other people along, bring change to an organization, get whole groups of people to buy into a different way of doing things or thinking a different way about doing things or problem solving kind of on a different level with a bigger picture idea of what the whole system and how everything works together interrelated in the system. And to do that, it requires a lot of complex thinking. And the more that you can develop that skill yourself, you also hope to then help your organization learn better and transform better by applying some of that same level of complex thinking. The problem with that is specifically and literally, Robert Keegan's work, one of his books is called In Over Our Heads, and how sometimes we actually expect more from people than what they're actually developmentally ready to give. And I think it's a really, really important point. And one of the reasons that it has hit home so much to me lately is because I've noticed that depending on the ages and the professional experience that my students have is pretty directly related in many cases to where they are in their cognitive development and their epistemological development. I can teach the same content to two different groups of people. One would be people who are mostly like those of you I'm talking to right now. So either mid or even late career professionals who have been in leadership positions in other organizations before or are moving towards leadership positions now. You're not, in other words, right out. There's a couple of exceptions, a couple of impressive exceptions, I will say, in our MPS program right now. But for the most part, you didn't just graduate and go straight on to your master's degree, but you've been around for a little while and you've worked in your organization or many organizations for a little while, and you're just kind of a little further along in the various stages of your life that you go through as you develop as adults. And that can impact not only how you learn, but also how you try to pass that on to other people and how you try to develop the people who come behind you and how you mentor people who come behind you. And so I wanted to take just a few minutes. I know I've already taken 9 just introducing what I want to talk to you about today. I get on my own nerves sometimes. Anyway, there's some theories of cognitive, moral, and epistemological development that I think are really important for you to visit when you can. I do not expect anybody in 802 to take any of the resources that I'm going to attach along with this video and really dive deep into them and incorporate them into your projects right now or any of that kind of stuff. I'm kind of more like planting a seed right now. So that when you do get to the point when you feel like you are trying to educate others, bring others along, mentor others, get people to see things from a different perspective, help teach them how to grow, help teach them how to create their own development plan or development plans for other people, those kinds of things, that you will sort of bookmark these resources that I'm going to give you as some important resources and some things to think about as you continue to learn and grow in your leadership studies. And that's about all I'm going to ask for you to do with this information right now. For those of you in 802 who are not also in 811, you will get to some of this in 811. And so you could also maybe come back to some of that, at this time. Maybe look at it over the summer, incorporate it into some other things you do. Like I said, you have enough that you're doing right now, but it's just related enough to some of the things that we've covered, particularly like in the last lecture that Stacy gave in 802, or maybe you haven't viewed it yet. I'm not exactly sure, but that has to do with transformation. How do you transform societies, communities, industries, whole organizations? And then in 811, we're talking about how does one transform an organization through how it transforms individual leaders within it. So all of this kind of stuff is related in ways that are sort of complex, and I'm not sure that I'm doing a very good job right now explaining it, except that I just want to tell you these are really great resources. So I mentioned Robert Kegan. He's written 2 books. One was in the 80s and one was in the 90s, and they are both now considered really foundational texts and kind of groundbreaking, actually. He's in the field of psychology, and as you know, this is all cross-discipline stuff. So we always draw a lot from psychology and sociology and philosophy in leadership studies, and of course the business and management worlds as well. But we also draw more from we should be drawing more from education than we are. But Robert Kegan's work is foundational to understanding educational psychology, basically. So In Over Our Heads is a really, really important book. And it is also what was explained in your scholarly journal article for 811 that you read earlier in the semester when we were in our adult development model. But I found this excellent summary of Kegan's work that actually I think it explains it much better. It puts it into lay terms. Kegan can get highly philosophical, and if you're not used to reading philosophers, and if you're not used to reading super advanced psychology textbooks and those kinds of things, it can get a little bit heavy. And the summary that I've attached to this video of Kegan's work is really, really, really important. But it's really, how do we begin to think about things through life when it comes to complex problem solving? So it's related to maturity and developmental levels. And I don't need to summarize it for you because you can read it, but I will tell you that it is worth your time if you do nothing but read the excellent summary of Kegan's work after you watch this video, just to know what I'm talking about. But there's a couple of other things that are really important to understanding adult development. For anybody who works in higher education, particularly if you work with traditional students. So your 18 to 22 to 23-year-olds that are right out of high school and go straight on to college. So that kind of traditional set that used to make up the majority of higher education institutions that now do not. People like you in these classes this semester are the ones who make up the majority now over the landscape of the entire higher education institutions. But still very significant to college campuses are traditional students. So for those of you who work in those kinds of environments, then I would spend a little bit of time with Perry's intellectual scheme as well. It talks about how do you meet students where they are and getting them to go through the evolution of material and thinking about things and making decisions and forming their own values and philosophy and how they learn over time, and how that's very, very different at the beginning than sometimes how it is at the end. And most often people aren't where we actually assume that they are or think that they ought to be at certain stages in life. They still have some developing to do, some maturing to do, and some growing to do as it comes to that sort of a thing. And then the other is King and Kitchener's reflective judgment model, which is actually my favorite, to be honest with you. I have found it extremely useful just in my own teaching. And so I've given you these three resources to have you think about it again within the context of adult development, whether that's leadership development, educational development, personal development, organizational development, and transformation. It's all related in some way. And I think that it needs to become part of the foundational knowledge that you have as scholars and people who are earning a master's degree in organizational leadership. It just doesn't always fit exactly as nicely as we want it to in leadership studies, since it comes more from the field of education. So I just wanted to share that with you, and I am more than happy to talk to any of you if this is something that really speaks to you for some reason, or you think it can really be used in your projects or used in your organizations, and you either want to know more about it or you want to chat with me about it. Please, of course, call me, talk to me, email me, whatever, as usual. And I'll be more than happy to talk to you about it. But I just wanted to give these resources to you right now so that I can plant a seed, for the way that you can use it in the future. So, okay, I'm going to shut up now. Goodness gracious, I thought it was going to be 5 minutes and it turned into 16. I like to talk too much. Okay, get back to work. Talk to you guys later. Bye.